أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سأل سائل بعذاب واقع للكافرين ليس له دافع من الله ذي المعارج. تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. فاصبر صبرا جميلا إنهم يرونه بعيدا ونراه قريبا. يوم تكون السماء كالمهل وتكون الجبال كالعهن ولا يسأل حميم حميما. يبصرونهم يود المجرم لو يفتدي من عذاب يومئذ ببنيه وصاحبته وأخيه وفصيلته التي تؤويه ومن في الأرض جميعا ثم ينجيه. كلا إنها لظى نزاعة للشوى تدعو من أدبر وتولى وجمع فأوعى. إن الإنسان خلق هلوعا إذا مسه الشر جزوعا وإذا مسه الخير منوعا إلا المصلين الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون والذين في أموالهم حق معلوم للسائل والمحروم والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين والذين هم من عذاب ربهم ربهم مشفقون إن عذاب ربهم غير مأمون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون والذين هم لأماناتهم وعهدهم راعون صدق الله العلي العظيم. صل على محمد وآل محمد.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا يحيى خذ الكتاب بقوة وآتيناه الحكم صبيا. O Yahya, take hold of the book with strength, and we granted him wisdom while yet a child. You hear the statement, age is only a number. The age has only relevance depending on what situation is or what the problem that occurs is. Am I an adult at 18 or am I an adult at 21? Or was it my sweet 16 where I became an adult? And it fluctuates and it varies and it depends on who I am and what I do, whether my age is a problem, whether my age counts or not in the world around me. I remember in 2003, you know, in America after September 11th, they started to go berserk. Everyone was getting on the no-fly zone. You can't fly, everyone can't fly. I remember one incident that happened in the airport where a white American child, his name was, I think, Matthew, something like Matthew White, or something. It was a really white name. And the reason I say this, he was 5 years old. And they said, your name is on the no-fly zone. So they said to his mum, stand back, move away from your son. And then the kid looked around and he started crying. She came to console him. They said, ma'am, get away from your son. And they moved him to the side and they started to search him to make sure he had no explosive material. This is a 5-year-old child. No explosive. And I thought to myself, this, alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. I said, this country has gone mad. It was unbelievable. 5 years old, because his name is on a no-fly zone. This used to be reminiscent of how the Middle East was. You know, when you used to enter Syria in the old days. I don't know if it's still like that now, but you used to go there. If you had a name that was wanted, you'd go into interrogation. Even though the person that was wanted was born in 1874, they take you into interrogation because they don't believe people die, just like us in Lebanon. You know, we have a missing leader that they know he's dead, but they keep telling you he's not dead and reminding you of this annually. This is the way the world is. There's no age where you actually die in this situation. But age only becomes a problem when the circumstances are not what we desire. People read the Quran and they read a verse like this. وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْحُكْمَ صَبِيًّا. Allah speaks about Yahya and says, we gave him this wisdom as a child. And we're not talking about a child, boy genius or girl genius. We're talking about the hikmah, or to have hikmah, to have wisdom. And we're talking about the wisdom that Allah speaks about is the divine wisdom that's inspired by God. Allah speaks about this. And I said it's only significant when it comes into the interest of people. Tonight, we commemorate the martyrdom of the 9th Holy Imam, Al-Imam Muhammed ibn Ali Al-Jawad Al-Taqi. This Imam, the 9th Holy Imam, was the youngest person to assume imamat by that time. By the time, if you look at from Amir al-Mu'mineen, all the way to Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'een, no one had assumed imamat at an age like this. Everyone became an imam. Obviously there were imams the whole time. I'm talking taking the reins, because there's Imam Natiq and Imam Samit. Let me explain what I'm saying. During the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Rasulullah said, Ya Ali, anta khalifati fi hayati wa ba'da mawti. That you are my caliph, you are the one after me, during my time and after my death. However, you know, when the Messenger of God was asking the companions, and he said to them, what is awwalu ni'mah? What is the first blessing? And all of them started jumping up. One person said women, one person said money, one said food, and they went all over the place. And everyone was given, everyone's given their own opinion. And then the Messenger of God looked around and he found Amir al-Mu'mineen silent. And he said, oh Ali, are you not going to give your opinion like the companions have? And then the Amir al-Mu'mineen looked at him and he said to him, Fidaka abi wa ummi. May my mother and father be sacrificed for you. Innama nahnu nahtadi bik. We get guided by you. You don't guide us. We don't guide you. We get guided by you. You're the one that should speak, not us. So in this case, to know, that's a long narration, I don't want to go into it now, but this case for you to know that during the time of where there are two leaders, one is active, the other one is inactive in the sense they do not speak. The questions are with the Hujjah that is there at the time, which is Rasulullah. After Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ali departed from the world, Amir al-Mu'mineen took his position, and during that time, Al-Hasan al-Mushtaba, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'een, did not speak in the presence or in the position of where his father was. So this is what we're talking about, assuming the Imam. When it's your time to rise. Rasulullah, 40 years old, Allah Azza wa Jal told him, it's now time for you to let them know. But Imam Al-Jawad was 7 years old. In one narration that's narrated on Muhammed ibn Ismail ibn Bazir, and he mentions this narration that it had been narrated to him by Ali ibn Mehziyar. Ali ibn Mehziyar, just to give you an idea of who he was a companion of Imam al-Ridha alayhi salam. And he was a companion of Imam Al-Jawad alayhi salam. And he was a companion of Imam Al-Hadi alayhi salam. And he was a companion of Imam Al-Askari alayhi salam. And what made him so famous, and he's always mentioned when they mention Imam al-Hujjah, is when the Imam went into occultation. Imagine, this man's been with 4 Imams, yet he still yearned to see Imam Sahib al-Amr. And he would go to Hajj year after year for 20 years just for the purpose so he can see Sahib al-Zaman. On his 20th year, he was able to see him. It's not someone that hadn't seen the Imam. Someone that had seen 4 Imams, yet he wanted to see Imam al-Asr. He narrates this tradition from Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Baziyah. Says, Sa'alt Aba Ja'far. Whenever you read a narration or you hear a narration, Abu Ja'far al-Thani is Imam Al-Jawad. Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad is called Abu Ja'far al-Thani. Another thing because Abu Ja'far al-Awwal, Abu Ja'far is Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir. So he is al-Thani. So when you hear a narration from him, another thing that they were referred to, Imam al-Jawad and Imam al-Hadi were also called Ibn al-Ridha. They would be called, both of them were called Ibn al-Ridha, even though Imam al-Jawad was his son and Imam al-Hadi was his grandson. So he says, I asked Abu Ja'far, I asked Imam al-Jawad, عن شيء من أمر الإمام. I'm asking him about something to do with situation regarding the Imam. فقلت يكون الإمام ابن أقل من 7 سنين. He's asking him to question, how are you an Imam at 7? Don't forget, Imam al-Jawad didn't live long. Imam al-Jawad barely, he became the Imam at 17. His Imamat and his life's the shortest life. He was martyred between 24 and 25. He didn't even make it to the completion of the 25 years. He says, can the Imam be less than 7 years? You were 7, is it possible? فقال نعم وأقل من 5 سنين. The Imam said yes, and even less than 5 years. Who is he talking about there? He's talking about the coming of Sahib al-Amr. So Imam al-Mehdi would barely be 5 years old when he assumes the Imam. This is why the Imam is telling him of things to come. The miracle of this narration is he knows that Ali ibn Mahziyar will live, the one that's in this narration, will live until when? To see the Imam. So he sees what he is speaking of. Was there any other children in this situation? In the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions Yahya. that Yahya, he says, we gave him this as I mentioned. Yet furthermore, Allah mentions even younger. And this is why you wonder why people question the situation. He mentions Isa ibn Maryam, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi wa ala ummihi al-tahira. He mentions that he spoke in the crib. He was still newborn and he spoke. He said, I am the servant of God. He mentioned that he is a messenger of God at this age. So this is not unlike what Allah Azza wa Jal does with those that He puts in charge. So this continues. This age debate is always brought up on how can someone so young assume power. And this is one of the arguments they had against who? Usama ibn Zayd, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi at 17 sent Usama to lead the army, the companions were upset that a 17-year-old would lead the army. And the reasons Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi did that is that when Amir al-Mu'mineen assumes his caliphate, no one will say, he is too young. Because if a 17-year-old was sent to lead an army, then a 30-year-old would be fit for being in charge of the Islamic Ummah. Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha had reached the age of 47 and he had not a child, and no children. This is one of the issues I get from many people, where they're not able to have children. You get people, they turn up and they say, I have some issues in having children, I can't have children. And the pressures of the world around you. I remember once I put, as they say, you put your foot in your mouth. I was in the car with a cousin of mine. And I'm driving, it was my cousin's husband. I was in the car with him and we were driving. And I said, listen, I was probably in my early 20s at the time. And I said, look, I see all my auntie's grandchildren. I haven't seen your kids yet. And then he looked at me and said, I've been married for 10 years. I don't have children. So, there's that brief moment of silence. Why? Because everyone gives the added pressure when someone doesn't have a child. Why do you have a child? And sometimes, I remember I had a neighbor when I was living overseas. He just got married. 1 year into his marriage, he goes, I need to go get medical treatment. I said, what for? He said, I haven't been able to have a kid. I said, and? It doesn't happen. Sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. Some people have many years down the track. But what happens is we start blaming each other. Maybe you're not functioning. Or maybe the husband says to the wife, and the wife says to the husband, maybe it's your problem. And the people around start stirring so many problems. Then his parents will talk to her parents will talk to him, and problems are being stirred. Allah Azza wa Jal, before we start condemning and causing pressure in marital problems, Allah says in the Quran, and listen to this, He says, Lillah, for Allah, mulku samawati wal ard. Who owns everything? Who has sovereignty over everything? Who has dominion over everything? Allah. يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Allah creates what He pleases. Whatever He wants, He creates. يَهَبُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ إِنَاثًا وَيَهَبُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ الذُّكُورَ. Allah gives. Allah grants to whom He pleases daughters and whom He pleases sons. So who chooses what I have? Allah. Who chooses where? Oh, now these days are people choosing their own genders. But anyway, who chooses what I have? Allah Azza wa Jal chooses. Allah Azza wa Jal chooses to whom he is going to give a child. Then he says, أو يزوجهم ذكرانا وإناثا. Or he gives them of both sorts. He gives them males and females. Sometimes some people, they only have daughters. Sometimes some people only have sons. Sometimes people have of both. Then he says, وَيَجْعَلُ, Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَيَجْعَلُ مَن يَشَاءُ عَقِيمًا إِنَّهُ عَلِيمٌ قَدِيرٌ. And then Allah will make whom He pleases to be barren. Allah knows. Allah is the one that is knowing. Allah is the one that is powerful. Whose hand is it in? It's in Allah's hand. So it's no one's problem. Allah is the one that chooses. Hala, some people might say, hold on, but there are medical procedures. Medical procedures for everything. Do I trust every medical procedure? I need to understand, I need to research, I need to know what I'm getting into, and I shouldn't jump immediately. You know, sometimes people, honestly, people come and say, look, my child's not talking. He doesn't speak. At what age should they speak? What they tell you, don't go by the textbook on what it says. Ask every parent. No kid's the same. No two kids are the same. Some kids speak first. Some kids walk first. Some kids don't even crawl. Did you know that some kids don't even crawl? One day they decide to sit up. The next second, they stand up on things. And then they're walking. Yeah, they walk, they didn't crawl. Because people think textbook, everything goes in a process. Some children take a time to grow teeth. Everyone's different. I shouldn't go mad when things don't go by what we are told. And the reason I'm telling you this, because these days, because we remove so many things, we have new problems. For example, we've removed the word, you can't even say discipline at school anymore, you know that? You can't say someone has disciplinary issues. You have to say they have behavioral inadequacies or problems. You can't say it's discipline. Unbelievable. They remove the word. Why? Because your child is very irritating because he might have a medical condition, which in our days was solved very quickly by our parents. They must have had some medicinal abilities in the certain ways that they would tune our behavior because they couldn't discipline us. This is the way it is. So yes, I do turn to medical solutions, but this is after I have exhausted everything that I need to do. And a lot of them is waiting, being patient for Allah Azza wa Jal to grant me or not to. So Imam al-Rida alayhi salam is an imam that people go visit his shrine to get children. Did you know that? People need children, they visit Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salam. This same imam was 47 years old without children. So people would come up and they would tell the imam, pray to Allah so that you get a child. And the imam says, I will get a child, and only one child. The imams knew what? They had knowledge. علم ما كان وعلم ما بقي. They had knowledge of what was and what is to come. They know علم المنايا والبلايا. They know what is to. When people say, oh, so you're saying they have God's knowledge. God's knowledge is another. God is not some. The problem is what people don't understand about God. God's incomparable. God's not a creation. So when we're talking about the ability of the Imams, we're comparing the Imams to other creation. There's no comparison to Allah Azza wa Jal is. Nothing can be compared to Allah. Laysa kamithlihi shay. But Allah Azza wa Jal had given this knowledge to the Imams. Yet the Imam said, I will only have this one child. And this child was Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad alayhi salam. Al-Jawad, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, lived during the reign of two Abbasid despots. One was Al-Ma'mun Al-Abbasi. Al-Ma'mun Al-Abbasi, before I go further, just to let you know, this is one of the filthiest family trees in history. If you look at family trees and decadence and filth, this is one of the filthiest family trees you will find. The family tree of Harun. From Harun, the one that killed Al-Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Qadim salawatullah alayhi. See, before this, Imams weren't imprisoned. Imam Zain al-Abidin, even when he was taken as a prisoner, was released. It wasn't something where they would sentence them. Imam al-Qadim was placed in prison as a prisoner to live as a prisoner. Harun was responsible for the poisoning of the seventh Imam. He had a son called Muhammad ibn Harun, and they called him Al-Amin. That was his title. And he had a son called Abdullah ibn Harun, and they called him Al-Ma'mun. Al-Ma'mun was responsible for the poisoning of the eighth holy Imam Ali ibn Musa alayhi salam. Then he had another son. And this was the second ruler at the time of Imam Al-Jawad. His name was Abu Ishaq Muhammad as well. Ibn Harun. He was also born from, because Harun was known for his debauchery. He went around, he would plant his seed anywhere. That's how Harun was. He had no idea of any form of moderation. He was a promiscuous individual. He was a heavy drinker and a gambler. So in today's society, they really like him. However, he was a mass murderer. Yes, today's corporations would really like him. So this Harun had these three children. The third one that we mentioned that were ruling, was Abu Ishaq Muhammad ibn Harun, and he was called Al-Mu'tasim. Al-Mu'tasim was responsible for the murder of Imam Al-Jawad alayhi salam. And especially his seed was the filthiest seed. Out of his brothers, they did not have worse than. His son was Al-Mutawakkil Al-Abbasi. Mention, this person had this child. And Mutawakkil of his seed, look how it gets filthier and filthier. From his seed, he had two sons. He had many sons, but two sons that were also responsible. One was Al-Mu'taz, and he was responsible for the murder of the 10th Holy Imam, Imam Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hadi. And the other one was Al-Mu'tamad, and he was responsible for the murder of Imam Hassan ibn Ali al-Askari. This was the seed of Harun, just to let you know. But who was Al-Mu'tasim? Al-Mu'tasim, the one that killed Imam Jawad, who was he? Al-Mu'tasim, firstly, was an illiterate. When I say an illiterate, sometimes people are partially illiterate. They can't read and write, but they still consider literate. They don't understand something. You might see someone that sees this sign and says exit, but he doesn't understand what it actually means and what it does. He can actually read it, but he has no idea. That's a form of illiteracy. That's someone that doesn't have good literacy. Sometimes people actually read. Now the problem is people say, and what's wrong with his illiteracy? He's the Amir al-Mu'mineen. He is supposed to be in charge of all the Muslims. That's the title that they give themselves. He says, I am the commander of the faithful. Could you imagine the commander of the faithful can't read? And even his advisor, He had an advisor, Muhammad ibn Abdul Malik al-Zayyat. He was also like him, Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Both of them had no idea in reading and of understanding. He reads a word and he says al-kala. Al-kala, for someone that understands Arabic, is clear in its meaning. And for someone that's considered to be Arab, would understand this. So he says to Muhammad ibn Abdul Malik al-Zayyat, his advisor, what does this mean? He says, how am I supposed to know? So they sit around not realizing what it means, and suddenly along comes one of the ulama that they know, the scholars that they have, and they bring him in. They say, what does this mean? And he says to them, this means pastures. Pastures, as in, where animals graze, and like anywhere where they graze, the fields that they graze in, it's called al-kala. The funny thing is when you read this word, this is like his predecessor. And this hadith, you'll find it about the first two that usurped the caliphate, both of them. That when they were asked, what is wafakihatan wa abba? Wa abba is like this, like pastures. It's also what animals eat. Both of them didn't know. Both were asked about this. They have a problem with what animals graze on. They have no understanding in this word, and they assume a position. Then as I was reading this hadith, I thought, hold on. This must be why they make the Prophet illiterate. Because in order to be an Islamic leader and ruler, you must be someone that either can't read or write or doesn't understand what's going on. So they said, we can't make the uniformity in this unless we also make our Prophet like us. And this is how I think they would have came to this understanding. Imagine like a Bush and a Biden and a Trump in the Arab world. We have them already. You have many of them, all these leaders, these clowns that take positions and have no understanding, and they're not educated whatsoever. Now, the Mu'tasim also, like his predecessors, was known to have a fiery temper. Those ones that when they get angry, بيحروا الأخضر واليابس. They'll burn everything. And in fact, many people were killed and left in his wake when he would get angry. He was known for this, in the manner that when he would get upset, the history speaks about people that were murdered just because Al-Mu'tasim got angry. He would send and make things happen. In fact, his battles, because his mum was a Turk, his mum was Turkish. So he had a good alliance and a fellowship with the Turks. So in Turkey, and he's the one that actually brought the Turks into the Islamic Empire. When I say Turks, you need to understand, I'm not talking about Muslims today. These Turks were not Muslims. These were non-Islamic entities mixed between Byzantium and the Arab world. They were brought into the Islamic world to walk the streets, just like if you see some of the Arab countries now where they bring non-Muslims into their countries and allow them to frolic and do what they want. And this is what's happened there. He went into a city in Turkey called Amorium. Amorium was occupied by the Byzantines. He entered the city, like proper Daesh, entered the city, massacred everyone, men, women, children, whoever they took as prisoners or the ghanaim for them to take advantage of, they took. And then he razed the city. Razed, not R-A-I-S-E-D. Razed as in he burnt it. He burnt it to the ground. And out of his tughyan, if you imagine how much of his hubris and his arrogance and his tyranny, he took the gates of the city back, because he went on this conquest with them, and he took it back to Baghdad to show the people what he did. imagine this is coming under the standard of Rasulullah. The standard of La ilaha illallah. You walked in and you desecrate a city. No, it's not desecrate, desolate a city. Absolutely raze it to the ground. Leaving no survivors except the ones that you take with you. So this is his history if you were to research it. And what he did actually is when he brought the Turkish men into the Arab lands, he would give the Turkish soldiers better uniforms than the Arabs. And he would give the Turkish soldiers power over the Arabs, that they were allowed to do whatever they want, where they wanted. In fact, the bazaars in one of the cities in Baghdad, the Turks would get on their horses and ride through the bazaars. They would trample anyone in their way. Men, weak, adults, children, whatever. And until he had given them too much power and they were amongst the people. What does this create? Because in Islam, we don't have race. In Islam, there's no such thing as race. You're Turkish, when you become a Muslim, you're a Muslim. You're Arab, when you become a Muslim, you're a Muslim. You're Persian, when you become a Muslim, you're a Muslim. You're Asian, from the subcontinent, from China, from Russia, when you become a Muslim, you're a Muslim. We don't have this race and this patriotism. What did he do by bringing them in? Because these weren't Muslims, what did he do? He recreated racism back in where Islam had come to remove it. So this made the people, the Muslims whom he's supposed to give, remember, any non-Muslim in Islamic land has to pay a jizya, and they're considered to be dhimmis. Dhimmi means fi dhimmat al-Islam, means the Muslims take care of them, but they're not Muslims. They're the rules of an Islamic government. So this caused his subjects to treat these outsiders with contempt and vice versa. So he kept everyone in check, a bit like Saddam's way, where Saddam used to keep those that he found were loyal to him under his son Qusay, and he would keep those that he was questionable about them under his son Uday. So that way he has everyone in check, and he kept them in contest with each other, but all under his rule and his umbrella. Al-Mu'tasim accused the Imam of riling against the oppositions against him. Because whenever any uprising would happen or some noise would happen, somehow Al-Mu'tasim would try and get a way to accuse the Imam with this. In one incident, he ended up, you know how they do those false flag operations to bring about, or they make some false accusations. He found people that were loyal to the Imam, but they weren't really loyal. You know those people that come out with their flags for you, but when it comes to the crunch, they're the first ones that sell out. So he had these men, and Mu'tasim gave them money to testify against the Imam, to testify that the Imam was collaborating against the government. So one day he brings him in, it's in the lobby as they're entering the palace. He seats him in the lobby, brings all the people around, and he says to the Imam, إِنَّكَ أَرَدْتَ أَن تَخْرُجَ عَلَيْهِ, that you've been trying, we're hearing that it's treason season, that you're here to rise against me. And the Imam says, Wallahi, ma fa'altu shay'an min dhalik. He said, but Allah, I have not done any of this. Then he said, Inna fulan. He starts naming him, wa fulan, wa fulan. He says, Shahidu alayka wa uhdiru. Shahidu alayka, and then wa uhdiru. This was that these three people, Shahidu alayk. And then he says, wa uhdiru. And these people attended. They entered the court. You know how you say, I've got three witnesses, they brought them in. They came in, and each one, this is how filthy they were. Each one was carrying a letter that they had written themselves and forged that the Imam had given them orders to rise, to build an army and rise against the government. So then they said, نعم هذه الكتب أخذناه من غلمانك. We got these letters from your servants. So then the Imam could see what was happening. He read the story. So in other words, they're about to execute him. There's no two ways about it. Hala, you see sometimes where the Imam al-Mujtaba gets poisoned. You've heard the hadith where Imam Hassan Mujtaba would get poisoned. Where would he go? He would go to the grave of Rasulullah and he'd put his stomach on the grave and then he'd be cured. So sometimes someone says, why does he do this every time, but the last time he's poisoned, he doesn't? See, there is a mission that needs to be complete. Each Imam has a set mission. When the mission's completed, this is the time where it ends. So if this is prematurely met and the mission isn't to finish, this is where the Imam invokes divine intervention. So when he could see that everything had turned on him and that they were about to put this accusation upon him and he would be executed, he said, it says that he raised his hands to the heavens and said, Allahumma in kanu kadhabu alayya fakhudhum. Oh Allah, if they have basically conspired against me, they have forged these lies against me, then take them. They say that the lobby began to rock to the point, you know, when something shakes, that people were moving around and attempting to stand and they would fall. And this is where Ma'mun, this is where the Al-Mu'tasim said, Ya ibna Rasulullah, inni ta'ibu mimma fa'alt, fad'u rabbaka an yusakkina. That I repent, please forgive me, and tell your Lord to bring back everything into its tranquil ways, back to settle it all down. So the Imam, because of beseeching, Mu'tasim beseeched him, just as Pharaoh had turned back against Musa and said, listen, you can have your people. This is the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. For us to consider, remember we spoke about divine mercy, that Allah Azza wa Jal always gives you that window that He wants to remove the wrath from you. That's why it wasn't an immediate strike. It was just a little, as I was saying, "Adad bikaffin," you know? It was just a little slap to wake them up. And He removed this from them by the Imam's dua. But now, as I said, wasn't the time for him to be killed. Of the narrations that we have with regard to the martyrdom of the Imam is the narration. One second, before I continue, do you want me, because the next part's going to be about another 5-10 minutes. Go through, you're okay. I don't want to hold you up. If you want me to continue, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Of the narrations that's mentioned is that he was poisoned by his wife al-Fadl. But there is another narration of how the Imam met his demise. Taban, we get different narrations with these things. There was a judge called Ahmad ibn Duwad. Ahmad ibn Duwad was a chief justice, Qadi al-Qudat. He's number one judge. You know, he's the one that walks, you know, a bit like, you know, the main judge that in Australia it's not, in America it's called Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Paul Roberts. That's who that is, that position. But in Australia, we have the High Court. It's not the biggest. The High Court's bigger than the Supreme Court. In America, Supreme Court is that, and that judge that resides, the highest judge is called the Chief Justice. In the Arab world, it's called Qadi al-Qudat. Qadi al-Qudat, he is the Chief Justice. And this man that was Ahmad ibn Abi Duwad was that Chief Justice. He was the Chief Justice during the time of Ma'mun. He was the Chief Justice during the time of Mu'tasim, Wathiq and Mutawakkil. So they're sitting together because a thief has been brought in and they want to punish him. Apparently this must have been of the early days of Mu'tasim. And there's a debate over where do we cut his hand from. So Ahmad ibn Abi Duwad gets up and says that the hand must be cut from the wrist. Why? He says that the verse in the Quran about tayammum says وَامْسَحُوا بِوُجُوهِكُمْ وَأَيْدِيكُمْ. And in tayammum, you know, I explained how tayammum is done here once, that when we do the tayammum, it's from the wrist down. So he says أَيْدِيكُمْ, and the Quran says this, so it must be all of that. Notice how this is Qiyas 101. This is called Qiyas. This is when someone brings a hukum from the Quran from their own pocket. You know, when someone says, oh, I believe in this because the Quran says this. And he gives the answer based on what he's read in the Quran. One of those is a guy called Rashid Khalifa in the United States. He's one of these people that believes in the Quran. He says, I only have one shahada, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, because Allah says, shahida annahu la ilaha illahu, wahdahu la sharika lah, but he doesn't say anything else. Then if you say what says Muhammadun Rasulullah, he says yes, but doesn't say ashhadu before then, so it's not part of the shahada. One of these people that reads and decides to give rulings based on this. Could you imagine? There's actually a hadith on where it is, but Ibn Abi Duwad wants to give his own opinion. Some of the judges say, yes, we agree with this. Other judges say no. Now, obviously, there's always the Salafist section, the one that wants to go all the way, as far as you can, okay? They say no, the hand is up to the elbow. We have to cut the hand from the elbow. So Mu'tasim says, why is that? Where's your evidence? So he says in the Quran, says, وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ. So the hand is all the way to the elbow. That's what we... And this is an absolute joke. They're both giving their opinion from the Quran. So then Mu'tasim says, okay. He looks down next to him and says, ماذا تقول يا أبا جعفر? What about you? What do you say? And the Imam says, listen, leave me from this. I do not want to take part. They've spoken. And Mu'tasim says, no, I want to hear what you've got to say. He said, please leave me. I don't want anything to do with this. Let them have their own opinions. And he says, أقسم عليك بالله. Mu'tasim says, I swear upon you by Allah that you respond. So the Imam says, because you have swore upon me through God, you've halaftni by Allah to say it, I will say. He says, إذا أقسمت علي بالله إني أقول إنهم أخطأوا فيه السنة. He says, إذا أقسمت علي بالله, if you have already sworn upon me or halafed me Allah, by Allah for me to say this, he says, إني أقول إنهم أخطأوا, that I say that they are all mistaken. إنهم أخطأوا فيه. إنهم أخطأوا فيه السنة فإن القطع. So that they've made a mistake with what the tradition of the Prophet was. فإن القطع يجب أن يكون من مفصل أصول الأصابع فيترك الكف. The qata' must be from where the fingers end. He says, and the hand, the palm is left. And then Al-Mu'tasim said, what is your evidence? He says, قول رسول الله. No conjecture. قول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله السجود على 7 أعضاء. The sujood is upon 7 parts. الوجه واليدين والركبتين. So the face, the hands, the knees. He says والرجلين, and the feet. فإذا قطعت يده من القرصوع. القرصوع is the wrist. If you cut his hands from the wrist, he says أو المرفق, or the elbow. He says لم يبق له يد يسجد عليها. He will have no hand to do sujood. وقال الله تبارك وتعالى وأن المساجد لله. That Allah Azza wa Jalla said the masajid. So a lot of people read this verse, what would they say al-masajid? The mosques. Just like when you see the verse إنما يعمر مساجد الله. You ask people, what does that mean? They say it means they build. يعمر means people that attend and go to, that make it amr, that build it. Build it's within. They make the numbers in there. So sometimes people read a verse, masajid. He says وأن المساجد لله يعني به هذه عفوا هذا الأعضاء السبع. The 7 points, the face, the hands, the knees, and the feet. This is what it's talking about. وأن المساجد لله يعني هذا الأعضاء السبعة التي يسجد عليها فلا تدعوا مع الله أحدا. Do not call upon with Allah anyone else. وما كان لله لم يقطع. Because these 7 are for God, they do not get cut. They're for God, they're not for anyone to do. They say Al-Mu'tasim was so impressed with what the Imam had said. But Ibn Abi Duwad is the Chief Justice. He comes back and tells his friend, I want revenge from that black man. He says, who's this black man? He says, Muhammed ibn Ali. Because the Imam was dark. Remember, his mother was Sabika. She was African. You imagine Imam after Imam, they had got darker and darker as we move. And one of the things we always say is, Imam al-Hujjah will come out, he'll probably be so dark, people say it's not the Imam. This is what we'll come to. How is this possibly the Imam? Because everyone's thinking what? They're thinking white Jesus. That's it. They think he's going to have long blonde locks like the depiction of Jesus in the movies. That Ibn Abi Duwad was so upset that he had been exposed by Imam Al-Jawad. So what he did, he knows Al-Mu'tasim is a simpleton. He said, I will go and convince him to kill the Imam. And the way he did it, he came up and he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. He said, you know, we learn from you. You are Muslim, but I have to advise you as your Chief Justice that is concerned about your affairs. He said, that little stunt you did, because it was 3 days later he did this, that thing you did 3 days ago, where you allowed Muhammad ibn Ali to show us up, you know, to make us look bad. That day that you did this was not a good day for you. He said, because we are your judges, and involved was your Senate, all the people around you, and your advisors and your people, and you allowed your enemy to look more intelligent than all of us. Did you know there are people that want him to take the imamate, and they say he is more entitled to this imamate? Now you've given this power. You've empowered them. Their numbers are growing. And then Mu'tasim, who was a simpleton. You know, when I say he's a moron, like these other guys that ruled, he turned around and said, thank you for your advice. This is correct. But he's more cunning when it comes to execution. So in this narration, it says that he gets one of his senators or one of his high-ranking officials to get one of the clerks that works for him. He says, you tell the clerk, don't get me involved, to invite Muhammad ibn Ali to his house, Imam Al-Jawad alayhi salam, to his house for a dinner gathering. Tell him with the excuse that you would like to meet him and get to know him. So this clerk goes and finds the Imam and says, I would like to invite you to my house for a dinner gathering. And the Imam said, you know we don't attend your gatherings. He says, no, say, you got to see that this gathering, the poor clerk doesn't even know what's going on. He actually thinks he's inviting dinner. He's happy that someone like a righteous man, because in the history it's written, it was the other sects say he was the most pious, most religious, most knowledgeable, the best mannered, best character of all the people of that time. Okay? So he invites him. He said, I want you to come to my house for the barak, to bless my house, into my house. So the Imam agrees to go to the house. When he enters the house, the narration says that they have someone there to deliver the food in front of him. And when he eats the food, he feels the burning sensation of the poison. So then he says to this man, find me a horse so I can leave. And the man says, why are you leaving so early? And then the Imam says to him, خروجي من دارك خيرا لك. If I leave your house, it is better for you. The Imam, look at the mercy of the Imam. He knows that this guy is going to be used as the fall guy for the killing. So he says, let me get out so they don't use, because they're going to use you. They're going to come, you invited him to your house and you killed him. Do you understand? Everything gets wrapped up and it's left. This is one of the narrations that's mentioned in how he was killed. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-zalimin. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us the opportunity to go to the Qadmiyin, to Baghdad, to visit the grave of Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad, Bab al-Murad. When I say Bab al-Murad, my brothers and sisters, on this night, you are gathered here and it was heavy rain. Remember, see all these things Allah Azza wa Jal considers. Your attendance, that you came through this rain, you came through this tough weather, and you came to attend Majlis Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad alayhi salam. So don't be stingy when it comes to your dua. Everyone has hawa'ij for the dunya and the akhirah. Your hawa'ij for the dunya, what you need for this life. You need the guidance of Allah Azza wa Jal, that He does not take you from this earth. We ask you, Allah Azza wa Jal, not to take us from this earth until you are pleased with us. Do not take us from this earth except upon the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. We ask you, oh Allah, grant us the opportunity to visit the grave of Muhammad ibn Ali al-Jawad, and grant us his intercession on the Day of Judgment. We ask you, Allah, do not even punish us for the blink of an eye. Oh Allah, and make us enter paradise without an account. Oh Allah, we ask you to hasten the reappearance of our master, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan, Al-Mehdi, arwahuna fidah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم صل اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. والأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والأرواح موتاكم جميعا، ولقضاء الحوائج وقبول الأعمال وشفاء المرضى وغفران الذنوب وتعجيل الفرج وحسن العاقبة. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.